Before we begin, let's give Derick a big round of applause for coming in.
Woo!
Mike and we're coming together as well. Hey, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it, guys. Mike. Derick, floor is yours.
All right, well, he's about to start.
Go ahead.
All right.
All right, guys, thank you for coming out. I appreciate you guys. Texas has been awesome. I've been over here for a few days now. Like, hopefully you guys can all hear me. This has been great. Like, everybody's been so hospitable. It's been fantastic. So first, I want to say thank you guys for having me out, and hopefully I can help you guys learn a thing or two about arm wrestling. I've been doing it about 12 years from Southern California, flown all over the world for it, from Turkey to Malaysia to, I don't know, been everywhere for it. So it's kind of my life, as I know it's a lot of your guys' lives as well. So I'm going to teach you guys the way I perceive arm wrestling and training after I'm so obsessed with the sport that I've been seeking out knowledge from everybody from day one. So I've been blowing up Devin Laird's phone from the second day I got into arm wrestling 12 years ago and nonstop. So hopefully I've learned a lot, and I've learned what I think works best and is most measurable, right, in the way that I approach arm wrestling. So I like to know things are increasing. Some of the things I'm going to go over, we're going to start with just basic intro and stuff. I'm going to assume you guys are brand new. We'll go over a little bit of safety and positioning and things like that. And after we get into that stuff, we'll go into inside pulling. I consider arm wrestling generally inside pulling with the shoulder forward or outside pulling with the shoulder backwards. Now, there could be outside hooks. There could be inside top rolls, right? So I go inside, outside. A lot of the names you guys use, high posting, defensive top rolls, and things like that, I'll use those words to make you guys feel familiar with it. That's not how I think about arm wrestling in general, right? I don't subscribe to one set move. It's kind of like you find an answer to a problem. It might look a series of different ways. So we'll do inside pulling. After each section, I'll stop, ask to see if you guys have any questions. We'll address the questions. So inside, outside, and then we'll go into strap pulling. We'll go over strap setups, how to apply different pressures and straps. After that, we'll get into programming, how I see the best way to get stronger for arm wrestling is. Then after that, we'll get into tournament and super match prep, how I approach a tournament, mindsets, prepping day of, week of, 2 weeks before, and then we'll talk a little bit about recovery, and then maybe if we have time, we'll get into building and running an arm wrestling team. I've been running an arm wrestling team out of Southern California for almost 9 years now. No arm breaks. My team does great. We have some of the best guys out there, so we'll get into that a little bit. Okay? Anybody have anything they specifically want me to cover that I didn't mention right now that you guys think I should touch on? No? All right, cool. All right, so basic intro to arm wrestling. As I talk to any new guy on my team ever, we always go over safety first, right? 98% of the arm breaks, unless you have some kind of deficiency in your arm I don't know about, a hairline fracture or some kind of thing happened when you were a kid or something weird in your arm, you're just have an average, normal arm, then the arm break happens right here in your humerus. It's a spiral fracture. So usually it's an injury of pride. If I was arm wrestling you and you broke your arm, I didn't break your arm, you broke your arm on me. Basically, if I'm the stronger guy, I represent a wall or a pillar, something you can't move. People tend to try to drive through it, and their entire life, your arm gets to about there, it can't go anymore. So you get to about that point, and something in your brain, pride I call it, tells you to lean forward with this shoulder, you think this arm is going to come with you. Well, it's not. It's going to stay there. And as you lean forward with this shoulder, this part of your arm is going to rotate in, this part is going to rotate out, right here it's going to break your head, right? So that's the most common arm break. Sometimes you have freak accidents, John Brzezinski broke his elbow, a few people have broken in other spots, but that's definitely the most common one. There's 3 simple rules me and my team follow to not have that happen. I think it's really easy to break your arm, but it's also really easy to not break your arm, right? So step 1 is keep your elbow inside your shoulders and as close to your belly button as possible. I know that's harder for bigger guys, big chested guys, but you got to try to find a way to get in there or always be striving to have your elbow in. Second step is keep your face connected to your hand. I like to say have your face connected to your hand, not look at your hand. If you look at your hand, I can look at my hand from over here. That's still unsafe, right? So we try to keep it connected to our hand. We lose with it or we win with it, right? Third step is generally pull backwards. For those of you guys that are new, especially if you're on day 1 or somewhere around there, I'll have a lot of guys stay completely squared up and always have a backwards motion. Even in a press, there's some kind of internal rotation of backwards motion. It won't be until you really start trusting your frame and everything before you start even thinking about driving sideways. It's really sketchy way of arm wrestling in terms of being new, right? So the potential for injury is a lot higher. So everything's squared up in that form. Now, if you follow those 3 rules, if you actually follow them, you should never get hurt. Like I said, I've never had an arm break on my team in 9 years. So that goes over general safety. But there's other small ways people hurt themselves, but it's just super uncommon. That's definitely the most common one. All right, so after safety, I want to get the general stance of arm wrestling. When I'm building an arm wrestler, I'm trying to understand how someone moves or maneuvers. First, I look at their feet. I can generally tell you how the general direction of someone's going to arm wrestle just based on their foot placement and how they're standing. So for right-handed arm wrestling, we'll call your right foot your dominant foot. So if I'm doing right-handed arm wrestling here, if you guys can see my feet, it'll be right foot forward, and this is a general stance. Now this will vary depending on your move and where you decide to drive, but if you're a new guy, this is how I have you standing. Your right foot will be forward, your toe will be facing forward. By your toe facing forward, that allows you to push backwards, a backwards motion like I just talked about, right? So other people, you see them put their foot sideways like this, or wrap it around the leg, things like that, and that generally shows that they're going to be driving sideways. So wherever your dominant foot is placed, it shows where the main drive is going. If you go backwards or sideways, you can tell where they plan to go. Your off foot, your non-dominant foot, where that toe is placed and where it's facing shows where your shoulders are going to end up at the end of the motion. If my foot is placed like this, I'm naturally twisting to end that way, right? So I'm torquing my body. There's a guy named Levon Sagnashvili, he's the #1 guy in the world. He walks up to the table like this, and then arm wrestles like this, completely. So his body is at all times twisting as hard as he can. His whole torso is torqued up. So obviously he's a little more advanced at a higher level, but it just goes to show what your foot placement can mean and what it can do. So for newer beginner arm wrestlers, I would have both toes facing forward, shoulder width. That way we have both hips touching the table at the beginning. As you advance in arm wrestling, naturally your non-dominant hip is going to start coming off the table. So in this case, my left hip, as I move forward, would start coming off the table. Newer people, I encourage them to keep both hips on the table at all times, right? And just slide up and down the table. You should have bruises on your hips after your first couple practices. It makes sense, right? Because you should be connected to the table, sliding up and down. After that, we talk about shoulders. Shoulder placement is big in arm wrestling. It's huge. It's a telltale sign if someone's hooking, they're going inside, they're going outside, or what their general movements are going to be. Keeping your hand on this peg is meant to keep your shoulders squared up for the most part. It's a safety precaution. If I'm holding onto this peg, it should keep my shoulders generally flat, which takes away the odds of me turning sideways, letting go of the peg, and breaking my arm, right? So, nice basic stance, hips to the table, and then holding onto the peg to keep my shoulders squared up. So that's a general stance in arm wrestling, right? Obviously, it gets way different depending on where you're at and what you're doing. So after that, I want to just start touching. Are there any questions about general arm wrestling? Anything else that seems awkward about what I said or something you're not understanding at all? Anything? Okay, so I want to start talking about hooking. I teach my team to hook first. The first day you come to my practice, I'm teaching you how to hook. Now, a lot of people don't agree with that. A lot of people teach top rolling at the beginning. The reason I teach my team to hook at the very beginning is because a few reasons. I used to teach them top rolling when we started, and I found that once you lose a match in a top roll, you think, wow, I should have moved my finger, I should have got a little bit taller, I should have made a small adjustment. Something that will set you up way bigger for success future in arm wrestling is thinking, wow, I should just get stronger. That will set you up for success way more in the future. If you're getting torn through on your big muscles, you're like, oh, well, I just gotta get stronger muscles. And that's a great way to approach it in the long run for arm wrestling. I've had guys that would only top roll do this and never went to the gym, ever. And they would just sit there and be like, oh, I should move my thumb next time. Instead of just thinking like, I just need to get stronger and start putting in the work. All you need to be a fantastic arm wrestler, all you need to do is just love arm wrestling, be obsessed with it, which probably most of you are, and have a work ethic, and be willing to put in work. Most people don't have both of them, right? Having amazing genetics, for sure that helps, but if you have a work ethic, that's more important than anything, right? If you're willing to put in the work. So, I would say, in terms of hooking, generally hooking is broken down into two different movements. There's inside hooking, where my wrist is going to touch your wrist, right? I call that deep inside hooking, or deep inside pressure, when my wrist touches your wrist. Now, there's high hooking, which is above the wrist, where our wrists don't collide, or both rotating hands, right? So you call that a high hook, or just anything above the wrist, a higher hook, right? So as I'm engaging, generally top rollers, when top rollers hook, they generally high hook, because they like rotating hands. When inside pullers tend to top roll, they tend to be too offensive. So I can usually tell by watching somebody like, oh, you normally top roll, huh? I can see them trying to hook, like, yeah, you're a top roller trying to hook, or I can tell when a hooker's trying to top roll. Because generally hook pullers or inside pullers are way too offensive in their top roll. They try to go through hands and they try to bulldoze and go sideways, and they tend to not use leverage and height as their main tools, right? So for general hooking, deep inside hooking, it gets broken down into steps. Actually, all arm wrestling follows through 3 steps, outside and inside arm wrestling. The 3 keys to any successful arm wrestling match is to establish your hand, meaning if I want a top roll, I want your hand to look like this, or compromised, your wrist to look compromised. If I want a hook, I want my hand to look like this. If I want a flop press, I want my hand to look like this. You decide how you want your hand to look before the match or whatever your move is, right? Now, the biggest thing you can do to influence an arm wrestling match is to get your hand to look the way you want to get your hand to look, right? So if you look at, I look at a lot of my arm wrestling matches as like, almost like math, right? If you say getting your hand to look the way you want it gives me a 30% likelihood, I'm going to pin you, we'll say 30% jump, then that's the most important thing. That's why I get to tone step. That's why it's step one, is establish your hand. People, so say you want a deep inside hook. I want to connect my wrist to your wrist. That's my goal. I'm a hook puller. Then if I shoot forward, and I don't connect my wrist to your wrist, but I get a mediocre hook. Instead of this, I get this, right? So we'll say that's 15% likelihood I'm going to pin you. This is 30%, this is 15%, right? Because I didn't fully get my hand the way I wanted. The most common mistake I see with a lot of arm wrestlers is that they don't fully establish their hand and they rush the pin, especially American arm wrestling, North American arm wrestling. We get this kind of mediocre grip and we start just slamming sideways as soon as we can without really establishing hand control. Hand control leads to everything. It's the biggest thing you can do in an arm wrestling match. Some people argue, what if you have a King's move? What if you're Todzilla? Okay, well there's like 3 people there. Other than that, everybody else needs hand control, right? So establishing hand is step one, and I encourage my guys, especially in practice, never pursue anything until you've had your hand. I will chase you to the ends of the earth to get my hand the way it look the way I want it to look, right? So that's step one, is establish your hand. Now, step two, say I've established my hand. Say I've gotten my deep hook in, right? Now I have my hook. There's 3 joints in arm wrestling. People overcomplicate this a ton. There's a shoulder, an elbow, and a hand and wrist. We call this one joint, right? You are always targeting one of the 3 things. As I target one of those 3 things on you, you're going to defend one of those 3 things. As you defend that, I will switch to the other thing, to one of the other 3 things, right? And you just alternate those. So I go to a deep hook like this. Say I want to attack your shoulder. You attack someone's shoulder by sliding your elbow across the pad. As I try to slide my elbow across the pad, you will naturally resist that. The moment I feel you resist that, I will switch to your bicep. The moment you resist your bicep, I'll go back sideways again. The moment you resist that, I'll go into your hand, right? I just alternate those 3 joints. That's it. Just pay attention to what joints they're using, what muscles they're using, and then attack those. It's not very complicated. People way overcomplicate arm wrestling, right? So when you start thinking in terms of those, you can call these doors, right? So door 1, door 2, door 3. Now the most important door is right here. Second most important, third most important. This leads to the most victories, then this, then this. So you develop keys over years of how to unlock these doors, right? I want to attack his chest. So I'm driving sideways, I can't do it, he's too strong. Okay, well, let me try this other key. What if I re-grip, and then I try driving sideways? Okay, it moved an inch. Okay, so that key worked a little bit. How about if I fake backwards and then slam sideways? Okay, a different key, right? Over years, you've developed different tricks, keys, tactics to open these doors, right? But if you're doing it successfully, at the end of a match, you should have someone owned outside their shoulder, whatever elbow flexor they're using, completely opened up, and hand completely sacrificed. That means you've owned all 3 doors. Then the pinning part, step 3, pin, should be the easiest thing in the world. If you've done everything else correctly, the pinning part should be like that, right? So practicing this way is super efficient, especially in practice, because then you get to know, you get the muscle memory, and you start reading people's arms. Okay, he's on his bicep, okay, he's using a lot of shoulder, and you start isolating these things without even thinking about it. When I grip up with someone, I know exactly what muscles they're using, what their intentions are, how they're gripping me, where they're driving. And so I know he's using way too much shoulder, so he's probably not guarding his bicep very much, or he's not using his hand very much, and so you just alternate those things. Now, it's harder at a tournament when you're trying to think of those, because it's a lot to remember, but practice makes perfect, right? So at practice, if you practice perfectly, get used to owning somebody before you pin them, dominate all aspects of their arm, and then pin them. Then when you go to a tournament, it's so much easier. Then you can just focus on 1 or 2 things, like go fast, go fast, go fast, and your arm will do the rest, right? So in terms of inside pulling, deep hooking, right? So that's a general aspect of arm wrestling. Goes for top rollers as well. Establish your hand, get them outside their shoulder, extend their arm, rotate their hand more. It's just outside pulling, but it follows the same rules, the same guidelines, okay? So we're talking about deep inside pulling. First, I'm going to talk about a deep hook versus a deep hook. What's important when you're hooking another willing hook puller. Now, I don't need to worry so much about establishing my hand because he wants the same hand as I do. He wants to go deep and connect his wrist to my wrist. So we're not going to have to stress about that too much. You can stress a little bit about how high you are up on their wrist, but in general, we're both going to go in. So I don't need to go to the ends of the earth and try to get my wrist in with his wrist. So we collide in wrist. Now, the most important thing, if you're a hook puller going against another hook puller, the most important thing at the beginning is your shoulder line. Meaning a line going from the outside of your shoulder to the back of your hand should be going outside of their arm. If I can make them use a few muscles, while I use a lot of muscles, then they will get tired. They will get tired before I do. So I want to be the first one to tighten up and use internal rotation, use my chest, use my wrist flexion, use down pressure, use all these muscles. I want to use 7, 8 different muscles. Why I have them on their bicep and on just cupping or something, or just a little bit of pronation. So I can sit and hold like that for a long time, including having my joint solidified, right? So that's the whole goal inside of deep hook versus deep hook battle. So how can I get him to use a few muscles while I use a lot? Then we start playing that game I just talked about, right? So Europeans are really good at this. They get into this hook, and their hits, once they get into this deep hook, is big. That's a huge hit for them, right? That's a big movement. They tried to attack the guy's chest. Okay, it didn't move. Now they're not going to try to attack the guy's chest and go, as hard as they can, and then find out they couldn't move the guy's arm when their arm's all the way back here. Then when they stand up, they lose, right? So it's small incremental gains on the table. So it'll be a hit, okay, that didn't work. Regrip, hit, okay, that didn't work. Back, hit, okay, that didn't work. And then they slowly try to make these small gains until they feel like they're ready for step 3. So each one of these gains you make, so I said taking the hand is 30%, owning the shoulder is 20%, owning the elbow is 20%. The goal is to get to 99% likelihood you're going to pin the guy, and then pin him. You know, if you're way stronger than somebody, you can get 20% likelihood you're going to pin him and just maybe just bulldoze through him, right? But why gamble? Why not just do it efficiently and check off all the check marks, you know, all the categories, right? So inside pulling is really a really big representation of tactical arm wrestling. It's very prevalent, right? Because you can see it. We're using all our big muscles, and if you gamble too much inside a deep, powerful hook, you will pay for it. If you get too offensive too early and you don't have any patience, then suddenly that big muscle's been opened up. It's really hard to regain a big muscle again once you lose it. So doing these small gains is a very big deal in terms of deep inside hooking versus deep inside hooking, right? Now, deep hooking versus someone that's attacking high, right? Someone that's running. Now, there's going to be a lot of small tips I give you guys individually. We'll get on the table after this, hopefully, and I'll talk to you guys about grips and setups and ways to do push-pass methods. I'll touch on that for a minute about a push-pass method. A push-pass method is where you are pushing into them, right? So, say they get a normal grip. Now, instead of me getting a normal grip and containing them with my fingers, I will push the bottom part of my hand towards them, giving me height in my knuckles, and also giving me a pocket past the back of their hand, right? So instead of me being here, my hand will be kind of off the back of their hand. Now this allows me to crash down. Now there's different types of hooks. Once you start going for deep inside hooks, there's dragging hooks or sideways hooks and things like that. I don't do a lot of dragging hooks because my arm's so long, I'm at the back of the pad already. So it's not really an option for me. But for a lot of you guys, it might be, right? So you don't want to have someone in your fingers completely when you're hooking at the beginning. That's not a good feeling. You want to give yourself a runway, somewhere to crash and to really establish that hook in like a violent, aggressive manner at the beginning. Your first movement as a deep hook puller should be really aggressive to establish that wrist-to-wrist connection. If you go slow or you let a top roller load up into your fingers, it's a lot harder. You're not just going to wrist curl someone anywhere near your strength level. You're not just having your fingers go, yeah, hey, like that hook, unless you're just way stronger. We'll assume you're the same strength levels, yeah, then you're going to have to chase. You're going to have to lock that inside hook in, and it's going to have to be violent and fast, right? So always keep track of your coverage as a deep inside puller compared to what they're trying to get on your hand. Now, as a deep inside puller, loading is not your friend. You don't want to load up. Generally, outside pullers like loading up because they can get pressure in your fingers before the go. It's hard for you to let go and regrip and let go and shoot for that hook, right? If I can get you to load up with me. Amateurs always load up. A lot of pros will not load up. They know right away, I'm not loading up with you. If you don't want to load up and you're trying to hook someone, they start loading backwards, you just pick your elbow up. You go, kids pick me up off the pad, ref. I can't do it. I'm not going to load up with them. So once you get them to stop loading, then it's way easier to deal with, right? Because if I can, so as a hook puller, that's the most important thing. Not letting them get in your fingers. Now there's a million small tricks and things you'll learn over the years about how to establish that. And I'll go over some of those today. It's easier if I get on the table with you guys and talk about it than it is up here because there's really small details and finger placement and pinky placement and things like that. But in general, that's the mindset, right? Don't let them get up in your fingers. Don't let them load up, and find a lane to crash into your hook for a deep inside hook, right? So inside pulling is just that. It's committing with the shoulder. It's getting tight, connecting your wrist with them, and having a downward force on your elbow. Sometimes I'll talk to you guys about using risers. Obviously, I don't use a riser, but people, when they hear the word riser, a lot of guys, especially if they're shorter, get like offended. And they're like, I'm not using no riser. Like, I'm tall enough. And they don't want to use it. It's like a pride thing. If you cannot get your elbow to the front of the pad with your shoulder pushing down on it, then you're limited on what you can do on an arm wrestling table while your feet are firmly planted. Now, if you have to be on your tippy toes, then you don't have a lot of balance. It's kind of wobbly, right? So if your feet are not planted, you can't have your elbow at the front with your shoulder pushing down. And that means when I get you to the front of the pad, you can't stay tight. Okay, so you're limiting what you can do on arm wrestling table because you don't want to use a riser, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense. So we have like 4 risers in my team, and if you can't do what I said, then I'm like, get on a riser. Because you need to be able to push down on your elbow at the front of the pad. So you go as far as you can go and stay tight. Otherwise, you're limiting yourself. It doesn't make sense at all, right? I know it's hard saying he's coming from this huge dude, but don't limit yourself on the pad, right? Okay, so one of the last things I want to talk about is, in terms of hooking, is you guys all know Devin Laird. Everybody knows Devin. Devin always talks about height being the ultimate thing to achieve in arm wrestling, and it is. I believe that controlling the top of the tower, if I get height on you and climb and go straight up, then I can dictate where I'm going to go from there. So the ultimate move to me is high hooking. Now, I consider high hooking an outside move because when you high hook, shoulder goes backwards, right? So we're getting to high hooking in the outside part of this. But in general, even in deep inside hooking, if I can jet my arm up, I can crash down on you a little bit harder. Now, there is an underbelly to this. There is a thing called undercutting in arm wrestling. Now, this is a very controversial topic. More older arm wrestlers get pissed off at me when I talk about this. So, we're in a deep inside hook. I believe that pronating is more prevalent in a deep inside hook than it is in top hook. Pronating means more, and you pronate harder inside a hook than you do in a top hook. It looks more obvious from the outside. It looks like you pronate way harder in a top roll, but really what's going on the table, you're pronating much more in a hook. So we get into our deep hook. I believe pronation is used best to stop getting pinned. So I'll pronate here before I get pinned, and I'll pronate here when I'm about to pin. Center table, I don't believe pronation is the most necessary or always the best thing to do for center table hooking, right? I believe that if you have the bicep and you have the elbow security and you're confident enough, that undercutting somebody is an easier way to control center table. When I say undercutting somebody, I mean, as the guy is trying to pin me, everybody pins in the same way in a hook. They all pronate and go down the back. If instead of me fighting his pronation, say he's in a dominant position and I can't pronate through him, I can't stop, my pronation's failing. If I give up my pronation, I cup and I supinate into his palm, what's going to happen is my wrist here is going to touch his wrist. He's trying to pronate my hand. Once you start pronating, you can leave the wrist for a second. Well, if while he's doing that, I connect my wrist here, I'm now touching his forearm. His forearm is a direct link to controlling center table, right? Losing the hand fight, let me touch his forearm and move it back to center table via cupping and bicep, because your bicep controls supination, right? So I'll get in this motion, I'm tight because I use my riser or I have the dimensions for it. I hold there, pronation's failing. I'll start undercutting, connect my wrist to his wrist, and start driving center table. Now, like I said, this is dangerous and this is scary. This puts a lot of pressure on your arm and on your elbow, right? But it's an awesome option in terms of re-controlling center table. Now I'm connected to your forearm, and I'm not fighting your pronation fight that you wanted me to fight, right? You wanted me to go down with the ship trying to pronate as I get pinned. No, at some point, if you're confident enough, you go, and you just take back center table, right? And then, like I said, I'll finish with pronation, and I'll defend with some pronation. But center table control, I feel is best if I'm still touching your wrist. The moment you pronate me, leave my wrist, right? So I'll reconnect my wrist to your wrist, and start moving sideways. Now, this is something that needs to be trained. This is something that in the gym, you would be focusing on doing palm-up lifts and being really comfortable being palm-up in a lot of your movements. You've got to build that confidence in your elbow, in your ability to drive across with your chest. It's a lot. But once you get that confidence, it opens up a whole world of hooking. Todd Villa is super confident with that. Even with his wrist up back, he'll get a strap and he'll be barely tied onto you, and he'll start hammering sideways with this palm up. It takes a while to get it, but it's such an awesome tool that no one talks about because it's the underside. Everybody goes for height, but if you're willing to chop, you can do a lot, right? So, are there any questions about hooking before I start moving on to outside arms? Anybody? No? Good. All right. So, outside arm wrestling. I was a top roller for the first 9 years of the arm wrestling, right? I didn't stop top rolling until I got injured. I had to stop top rolling. One of the most rewarding feelings in the world is to always be running from somebody, and then one day when you start hooking, you start beating them in the hook, it's great. You're like, I didn't run from you, take that, right? But I understand evading and using tactics. Now, in a top roll or any kind of outside motion, you're trying to establish hand control big time. You're trying to sacrifice their wrist. Now, a wrist bent back this much is just as good as a wrist bent back this much, even better. My goal in a top roll or an outside move is to establish hand control, get your wrist bent back a little bit, but just enough where you think you can get it back. I want to have your wrist bent back just enough where you're going to chase me to get that wrist back. If I over-rotate your wrist, then any puller knows what they're doing. The moment I know my wrist is done, like, oh no, he has that wrist, then I'm going to either flop press or I'm going to uppercut. I'm going to start doing this. The moment I know it's gone, why would I sit there and hold on to it all the way? Unless I'm in a tournament, I'm going to try to win. I'm not going to give up right away. So if I take their wrist and I keep them thinking, oh, it's right there. It's right there. Then they'll chase you to the ends of the earth, try to get that last inch back right before you pivot, right? They'll hold on way longer. If you just take it enough, just what you need. Because like I said, that same tactical advantage is that. It doesn't matter. Now, the way I perceive outside arm wrestling is in taking somebody's hand. The more you respect their hand and wrist, the further back you should go into their fingertips. The weakest part in a hand is the fingertips, right? Where the fingernails at. That's the furthest part away from the palm. The strongest part of the hand, weaker, weakest, right? So when I'm thinking about busting somebody's hand back, if I'm arm wrestling, I don't know, Levon, I'm arm wrestling Levon, you're gonna see me top rolling and jetting into his fingertips back towards my own pad as hard as I possibly can. I'm gonna be trying to get him off my hand so he doesn't have good coverage, so he can't control me. And then I'm gonna be obsessing on where his fingernails are in my hand. And I'm gonna be flying back to get pressure in his fingernails. As an outside puller, you should always obsess on how much coverage they have in the back of your hand and where their fingernails are at and find a way to put pressure in there. Now, like I said, I don't really subscribe to low hand, high hand only. I find a way to put pressure in their fingers. The way they grab me is where I'm gonna put pressure, right? Now, if I feel like they're grabbing me low, well, pressure's about to come low then. If they grab me high, pressure's gonna come high, right? So I'm more fluid with it. I'm more comfortable with the top end. There's a ton of games and small things you can do. Work on that again, small nuances on a table in terms of creating space and getting them off the back of your hand and not allowing them to get great coverage. But that's just all you have to worry about is where their fingers are at and how you're going to put pressure in their fingers. Now, the more you go in a negative cycle to put pressure in their fingertips, the more you're giving up your offensive ability to pin them, right? So if I'm sliding way back here to crack someone's wrist, it's going to be really hard for me to pin. I've taken their wrist here. Hopefully I only took it slightly, but if I took it big time, then they're going to start doing this flop press stuff right here. Now, hitting someone and sliding all the way across the pad, especially with their dump wrist, is a hard sell because I gave up my side pressure and my offensive ability. I want to pause right there. I want to talk about pressures and terms. I forgot to do this. I consider back pressure your ability to slide your elbow back. Everybody has their own definitions, kind of these words, right? For me, back pressure is your ability to slide your elbow back. Posting pressure is your ability to hammer curl up. Side pressure for me is your ability to slide your elbow and use internal rotation at the same time, right? Those are the ways I see these terms. So you guys understand when I say it, how I see it. My side pressure gets compromised as I take a hand, right? It's out here. Now, I did everything I could to take that guy's wrist. Hopefully I did. A wrist in a match, in a super match, or in just one match, it's a lot like a bottle cap. Once you pop someone's wrist, it's way weaker. When you take it one time, it's going to be weaker the rest of that match. We'll say it's 30% weaker, right? After that, it's just never as tight. So if I crack your wrist the first round, and somehow I accidentally elbow foul, and we get a restart, I can crack your wrist probably center table, right? If I got it once, it's going to go easier and easier as the match goes on. Your wrist is not going to get more solid suddenly unless the guy let it go on purpose. I had a match with Tim Breslin recently. I got out of position. I was like, oh, it's going to crack. So I let it go. I didn't want him to take it and damage me, so I let it go, and I tried to slip. I got called for the foul. But the next round, I held on to him just fine. I just had to reposition, and I didn't want him to crack my wrist, so I flopped it and got a foul for it. But I knew that if he takes it, it's going to damage me, and I might not be able to hold on to him anymore after that. So once you take that wrist in here, because I went all negative. I tried to hit those fingertips that were so important to me. I cracked this super strong person's wrist. And like I said, the more I respect them, the more I'll go on a negative cycle. Now, if I don't respect your wrist and I feel like you have a weak hand or small fingers, I'll probably top roll you center table, which will leave me a ton of offensive options. But the more you go negative, the more you're giving up those offensive options. But we have to establish hand control. No matter what, we have to establish hand control. So if I feel backwards, I'm going backwards, right? At the beginning of the match. Now, I'll either get a restart or just through re-gripping and through cupping, you can work your way across the pad. I'm cheap, man. I'm a cheater. So if I take your wrist out here, I'm probably going to be like, oh, L-foul, restart. All right, let's try this wrist again. But I'll be loading up way more offensively with my elbow across the pad, getting ready to top roll you next time, but way more offensively right towards the pad because I know it's weak. It's cheap, but what I think. So in terms of hand control, that's the most important thing I teach you in outside pulling. Just obsess on where the hand's at. That's the most important part. You crack the hand, leverage is all opened up. Then you follow the same three things. Where's he? Okay, I got his wrist. I can pull backwards and open up the elbow, go sideways, give him out a shoulder. I can keep rotating the hand if I want, and then until you get step 3, you're ready to pin somebody, right? I want to load. As a top roller, if I can get someone to load with me, it's great. From my perspective, as a top roller, it's way easier to handle you going from 60 to 100 miles an hour than it is for me to handle you going 0 to 100 miles an hour, right? If I can get you to load up with me, I got you in your fingers already, then you can do your move, but I've already generally felt your strength, and I have already in your fingers. So once they say go, you're not gonna have as much oomph as you would if we did a no load. Then it's a lot harder to roll you out. So I want you to load up with me, and that's the top one. Now, if they don't load up with you in terms of posting pressure, you can still put pressure in their hand and fingers and keep trying to get your hand outside there. So the load would be in my hand, right? The load would be me jamming forward with my thumb and trying to get your hand to sink and get less coverage, or be pulling my hand backwards into your fingertips before they go. Maybe not hammer curling pressure, but I'm loading up the hand a ton and flexing my thumb and trying to get you off the back of my hand before they say go. Because the less coverage that you have, the way better it is for me. You can't hold it, right? So people, when they grip up with me, they always say, wow, your hand's so thick right here. Yeah, like I put a lot of work in on doing thumb drive and stuff like that to get this thing like a baseball, so you can't get around the back of my hand and control the back of my hand. I mean, it's important, right? The less coverage you have, the better it is for me. That was one of the biggest things Tim said after our match. He said, I don't want you to do with your hand, I can't get a hold of you. So, yeah, it's a big gripe, but having thicker hands in terms of your thumb thickness, whatever this muscle is, another thumb muscle, is important. And if you can work on it, the best ways I found to work on it were when I work with ropes. I grab a rope, like Jim has one of those endless rope machines. I would grab it, I would push forward with my thumb, and then push my thumb down over and over again, just in a loop, right? And I would just top roll that loop. By the time I got done, my hands were engorged with blood, and it hurt, and they would cramp up. That was the best thing I ever found for it. Otherwise, arm wrestling in a strap is great for it, because in a strap, you're doing a ton of thumb drive in a strap in general. A lot of pronation is done with thumb drive. Now, speaking of pronation and top rolling, like I said earlier, I think that pronation is most dependent in a hook, but when you see a top roll, it looks like pronated right to that guy's wrist. Now, pronation, your pronator teres muscle, the biggest pronation muscle, is an elbow flexor. It starts right here, it goes down this way, then divides into two. So the part that goes above your elbow is an elbow flexor. It makes me flex my elbow. So you can work pronation just by doing hammer curls, slightly. You're not really isolating it, but you are working your pronator teres. Any kind of hammer curl, you're working that muscle. Now, if you're pronating as you do the hammer curl, it isolates a little bit more, right? But in general, hammer curling is the most important part. I called Travis Pagent about a year ago. I said, hey man, I've seen all your training videos. I said, I've never seen you do pronation. Like, how do you work pronation? I've only seen you do pull-ups and stuff. Do you ever work pronation? And he goes, man, what you talking about, man? I don't do no pronation, man. That's stupid. I don't touch pronation, man. And he's like, I said, what do you mean? He goes, in a top roll, he's like, you post, you hammer curl, you post up. Their wrist folds underneath you. At the very end, you do a little bit of pronation. The more I thought about it, I mean, it's true. If I pull backwards and I have a good grip, and I pull backwards and I post into your fingers, your wrist is pretty much going to fold with just the back pressure and the up pressure. Then the pronation is minimal, right? If it's already kind of sacrificed or at its limits, your wrist, then I just got to do a little bit of pronation at the end, and it collapses. So you're not really pronating through someone's hand unless you're deep in their palm. You're generally posting back and then doing a little bit of pronation, right? So then when I start thinking about inside hooking, I'm like, oh yeah, there's way more pronation. We're locked in, we're pronating through someone's pronator. So I just feel like there's more pronation involved in a hook than a top roll. So if I had to advise someone to do one thing for a top roll, it wouldn't be do a ton of pronation. It would just be doing hammer curls, do a ton of hammer. If you want to work one muscle for a top roll, I would say just hammer curl your life away, right? In terms of what will yield the biggest results, of course you want to work pronation, but I'm saying it's not the most important thing. So there's high hooking and low hooking. There's high knuckle posting options, and then there's low handed posting options, right? I go low-handed if you're going low. If you're trying to grab below my wrist, then I will be emphasizing my wrist pressure to get your hand. If you're going high, then I will challenge you high with knuckles and rising pressure. Now, like I said, having height is always the ultimate thing in arm wrestling. If I control the very top of the mountain, then I can dictate and make whatever I want to happen. Now, a high hook, knuckles up, controlling the wrist, is really similar to a high posting top roll. It's just with the high posting top roll, you just keep going. With the high hook, you stop, and then you go wherever you want from there, right? But it's really similar in its mechanics and its setup. It's really similar. I control the hand with my knuckles high, and from a high hook, I can go back in, I can continue to roll out, I can press, I can go anywhere I want from there. Now, a low hand top roll. To me, a low hand top roll is very similar to a flop press or something like that. Meaning it's a very offensive move, and once you're in there, you don't have a lot of options. It better work, because once you get down here, if you've bailed your rising ability, and I hit as hard as I can, and I'm down here underneath the table, I can no longer hook, right? I'm not going to get that back. I'm also not going to suddenly rise. You never go from fully dump to rise. You're not just going to flex the guy like this, right? That's not going to happen. So once you're down here, all you can pretty much do is just keep hitting until the guy hopefully gets you hit him, right? So it limits your moves. It's a very limiting move. Now it's very powerful. It's very explosive, just like a flop press. It really is. It's the end all be all. But in flop press, you get there. What are you gonna do from there? You're just gonna keep pressing, hopefully until you pin the guy, right? Now both those moves are way more powerful than a strap. I think the biggest thing you can do in a strap, the move that a strap amplifies the most is a low hand top roll. Because the most important thing in a strap is putting pressure on this bottom strap, which a low hand top roll does, right? And then you're buried, you can't climb outside my fingers because the strap is holding you in. So low hand top roll really optimizes the strap. So I think low hand top rollers should keep strap as a very great option. Most low hand top rollers that go to straps do really well with straps because they like it. It's built for them, right? Now a strap amplifies everybody, but I just think it amplifies a low hand top roll the most, right? So in terms of low and high, basically the time I'd really choose low hand top rolling is just if there's I'm pulling against a deep inside hooker and I can see him come forward with the shoulder, trying to get ready to chop down on me, and I'm having pressure in that bottom wrist, ready to roll out. But besides that, I'm not a huge proponent of it outside the straps at all for me. It's really dependent upon this guy and what he's going to do to me. How much is he trying to hold on to me? Now, the answer to any low hand top roll, arm wrestling basics of any low hand top roll, if you dunk your riser to me, I'm going to go high. You dunk the ankle, I'm going to go right over your wrist, and where it's all weak, you already dunked it, I'm just going to control the top of your hand. Someone dumps, you go high, right? So it's a really obvious answer, especially outside the straps. And even inside the straps, the same thing. You go inside the straps, you want to go above the guy that's going really low hand. You want to always have a little bit of height over that person to control it. That's why, like, when I pull Chance Shaw, right, for instance, Chance, the low hand top roller, all right, I'll just go up and have my arms longer than his, and then I'll just cup high with high knuckles. I'll cup right through it because he's low, so I'll just control the top part of that. He can't get out. They're really depending on you to try to hold on here. If you don't, they have nothing to work with, right? So, low hand top roll is explosive and really good against inside pullers. To do it any other way is rough. It gets a little dicey after that. Okay, so yeah, that's outside pulling. You guys have any questions? Outside pulling.
You'd say the low hand top roll is typically for guys that have a long maneuver? Because you can pull the nose up.
As a long arm guy, right, I can never get my elbow to the front of the pad with my knuckles straight up. I will cover everybody's hand if I do that, right? They won't allow me to start this way. So a low hand top roll is generally about raising your thumb ridge into their hand, raising your thumb into their hand. It's not about just dumping this. It's not about dropping this. It's about getting this up. Now, if I want to be at the front of the pad as a top roller, then yeah, for me especially, I have to low hand top roll, right? I have to set that up. That way I can get your webbing anywhere near my webbing. If I'm dead set on this. But if you ever see a low hand top roller not having their forearm at the front of the pad, that's ridiculous, right? You already gave up height here. Why are you not vertical? You should be completely vertical so that way you can post straight backwards, right? So yeah, if the low hand top roller is the back of the pad or the middle of the pad, it's just deficient in their setup because they're not optimizing all things they could be using. They're not using the fulcrum point and rocking back off their elbow. Now, in general setups, even in hooking and top rolling, you guys, having your shoulder above your elbow and pushing down does a ton. It's a focal point to lean and rock back off of. If your elbow's way in front of your arm like this, then you're basing everything off using your lat and your shoulder to drive back. You can be using body weight, and it can do a ton. It solidifies your side pressure. When I lean down my elbow, it pinches my joints together, so it's way harder for you to go sideways on it. I can just kind of lean on it. You're not going to go sideways, right? It's still using muscles, but it's your joints in general will help you create that pressure. But same thing with top rolling. You see John Brzezinski all the time. He gets a deep hook. He'll lean, he'll push down on his elbow, and he'll start rocking back. Because this fulcrum point right here, he's rocking off his elbow. He's not leaving his elbow out there and flexing, just rolling someone out. He's using his joints as a pressure point, right? And pushing off that. All top rollers should be. You should be leading back here and pushing off your elbow as you top roll something, right? Same thing if you do a high hand in the center table. It's really pushing off your elbow. A lot of guys leave that arm way out there in front. You'll see them their shoulder not over their elbow because they're really emphasizing hand, and they'll forget to rock off their elbows. You're just trying to iso curl somebody without using your frame, right? So it doesn't make a ton of sense. But in terms of being at the front of the table and having height, low handing will allow you to have your forearm vertical, for sure, right?
Derick, this is not so much a question because I don't know enough about top roll to actually ask a specific question about this. But I do, as you say, whenever somebody telegraphs a low hand top roll, I always set up high and I go this way.
Right.
But I'm an inside puller. So I tell people, don't ever telegraph a low hand top roll with me, or else I'm going to just top roll you with opposed to top roll. So just set up high and then go back into a low hand, and you'll have greater success. For me, it's the same thing, you know. But do you have any comments on that?
That in terms of telegraphing, that's smart, right? To not show what you're going to do, but also as a top roller, I want to have pressure in your fingers. So if I'm going high and I allow you to have a big gap, and I know you're going to crash down here, right? If I allow you to have a big gap, it's to give you a greater chance of success as a hook puller, because I'm giving you that gap rather than having pressure in your fingers. So, like I said, since I'm only purely low handing this guy or high handing this guy, I'm like, let me get pressure into his fingertips. Where are his fingers? So I'll dump as much as I need to dump to get pressure in your fingers, right? It might be like a medium hand top roll, or like a low or a high. It kind of depends on how I'm reading your hand, right? But in terms of trying to keep it fresh and exciting and keep it guessing, yeah, I understand what you're saying. But I wouldn't want to sacrifice speed or pressure in order just to try to be tricky. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so with a fast hooker, if you set up high with them,
yeah, because when I go too high with knuckles, you're giving this divot right here for them to really crash into and get a hold of, right? So I might be like this, a little bit flatter, so they can't really get a hold of it, so I can roll out, right?
Okay.
But you just gotta play by ear. That's why we keep it simple. Put pressure in his fingertips. Where his fingers, that's where you put pressure, right?
Okay.
And then roll it out from there. Okay. Any other questions on outside pulling? All right. After that, I want to get into strap pulling. Everybody always has a lot of questions with the straps. It took years to kind of really understand what was going on and be comfortable in the straps and understand how to set up a strap for outside pulling, how to set up a strap for inside pulling, and what's the most important pressures inside a strap. Now, with all of these things, it's easier if we got on the table with you guys individually, but we'll go over stuff I can kind of show you up here, right? I need a person. I need a human being up here. All right. So, first thing we're going to talk about is universal pressures in a strap. I consider the top part of a strap that goes over your hand, the hand control strap, and the one down here, I call this the horsepower strap. This bottom strap is linked to your lat. It's a rope tied to your biggest muscle. You can just drag this strap back and you can open up someone's arm. My lat is stronger than everybody else's arm, right? Your lat should be stronger than my own. You really just want to get into it, right? So to avoid or diminish pressure in this strap is the dumbest thing you can do in the strap, in terms of strap form. If at any point you're not putting a ton of pressure into this bottom strap, you are doing yourself a huge disservice, right? So in all setups, give you the buckles easier. Most people want straps low. No one's ever given me a great argument about why you want straps high. I've sought it out. Some people say it just feels better on the wrist, but they really can't define why it feels better on the wrist. They just say, I like it high. But most people, 99% of people want straps low. The lower it is on your forearm, the more pressure you can put into it. The closer I grab to the tree, on the end of the branch, right, towards the tree, the harder it is to move it, right? Same thing. If you grab me right here, you're not going to control anything, right? You grab me too close to the base. Same with the strap. I want this thing as low as possible. Now, most rules are an inch down from the wrist line. A low strap is 1 inch down from the wrist line. That's what you would call a low strap, right? So WAF, it's an inch down from the wrist line. Now, what I'm doing here, this is where things start getting dicey. Everything's neutral in terms of straps right now, but after this, things are going to start getting really cheaty and really weird. So, we'll start with outside straps. An outside puller wants slack here. You do not want your wrist touching this guy's wrist as an outside puller. You want space here. Space here will allow, I can loosen up the space later and have a loose strap so I can slide around. But in general, this is going to keep me up in his hand if I have a loose strap like this. So you'll see Devin Laird a lot, right? He does kings moving, so he likes to have a really tight strap so you can't climb his hand when he's doing kings moving. So when he puts on the strap, you always see him going like this. He does that first, and then he tightens it out. Now what he did was he connected your wrist to his wrist, so you can't climb up into his hand inside the straps. Now as a top roller, I want to climb up hands. I don't want to be tied to your wrist. So I'm going to be creating space the whole time putting on the strap, trying to keep my wrist back, so this doesn't get tight. Right? So, we'll go there. Now in terms of the hand control strap on top, as an outside puller, like I talked about the thumb ridge earlier, I want to maintain my thumb ridge as high up into his fingers as I can the entire time. I do not want to be in his palm. Right now, the strap is going to hold on for both of us. It's not really going to be his fingers, but if I can get into his palm, the deeper I'm in his palm, the more control he has as a hook puller. Well, somebody's hooking, right? So I'm trying to stay up, I'm keeping my thumb ridge up the whole time. Now, webbing is a really big deal in strap rolling, so you want to always have your webbing up, but everybody kind of knows that. Most people are always trying to drive up in a strap, trying to get their thumb webbing higher than the other guy's thumb webbing. That way when we start hitting maximum resistance, I'm above your hand and I can rotate your hand. You never want to be below somebody's webbing, if you can help it. Unless you're so confident in your hooking ability, generally you always want to have your webbing as high or higher than theirs. Right? So as the strap's getting tight, I'll be keeping my thumb as open as I possibly can, so I stay up in his fingers. When I close my thumb will be getting closed like this. Keeping my ridge high, right? I'm not closing my thumb and giving him all this coverage on the back of my hand. I'm keeping my thumb as high as I can. Now, when they close straps, the tournaments are supposed to be, when you close the strap, you're supposed to pull it down towards the guy with the buckle's wrist, meaning that your hand control strap will slide down. You always want straps towards you. General rule, you want straps towards you. You want this strap down, you want this strap down, as far as you can get it at all times. As this is up here, if my strap is high, I'm committed to his palm right here, and I can't re-grip. I can't do anything because that strap is holding me right there. The more I get the strap down, now, yeah, the more I get deeper through the strap, now I'm able to maneuver my knuckles, right, as I get it deeper into my hand. So with this, the first adjustment, I'll be going for height, and I'll be going for little knuckles up to try to get the strap to drive down as it gets height, right? So it'll be punching up with my hand and moving forward and keeping my thumb open. Now, as I feel them tightening it up, I'll start low-handing again to get my thumb back to his fingers, right? So I got the webbing up, I got the strap. This is fine for me. Of course, I'd like it up there, but this is fine in terms of how deep it is. But I'll be staying into his hand. Now, when he closes his fingers, hopefully he has minimal coverage, right? Because I'm staying up there. And then when I close my hand, I don't want him touching his bone. He has not reached the bone, so I'm okay with this in terms of top roll, right? I'll be creating as much pressure as I can out there. Now, when I start the movement, like I said earlier, I think a low hand top roll is the best style of top roll, right? If I go high knuckles right now, he can really crash in on my hand, and it gives him a good option as an inside pull. So most of my strap pulling will be low. I'll start driving my thumb up, or my elbow forward, sorry, to get extra height here, and then the strap's holding him in for me. So now I just got to put a ton of pressure on this strap. 80% of pressure goes in the bottom strap, the horsepower strap generally, and about 20% here in containing him in my hand, so that way he can't go too far. Then we start the pressures, hopefully it just rolls out, right? I'm able to put a ton of pressure in here, rise towards my face, and that should bring him with me, hopefully, unless he's just way too strong. But in terms of just creating space, it's about keeping your thumb ridge as high as you can and not committing too far into his palm, so you can't get great coverage on it, right? I want to stay up. And webbing is a big deal in terms of that too. Now you're going to learn over the years a ton of cheap tricks on how to get people off your hand or how to manipulate the strap so they feel uncomfortable. Like I said, that's going to be a small detailed thing I can show you guys, but it's like really small games of inches and pressures and movements. Now grip has a place in arm wrestling. I don't care what anybody says. It has a place in arm wrestling. It's not a huge player, but in a strap setup, grip can do a lot of things. If I have you in my hand in a strap, and you're trying to rise, you're trying to climb at all, my grip can sink you and sink your webbing below my webbing. Now I'll call grip pushing my thumb and gripping like this. Both of them will sink you because you can't pull away from me. We're strapped together. You cannot run away from me, but I can slide you up and down inside the straps, right? So as I want your webbing below mine, I'll force him down with my thumb like this, start pronation there, and then I'll grip him in tight so he's buried into my hand. So now I have a ton of webbing height on him right now. Our thumb webbing is way higher than his, and I have him pushing down with my grip so he's sunk deep into my hand. So he can't. It's like here. Yeah. so now the top rolling part should be relatively easy because I drove with my thumb and my grip. So even Devin Laird said I'm going to work my grip because in the King's move you can grip tight and keep them in your palm so they can't rise, they can't roll out your hand, right? So that's an outside pulling option in the King's move. So grip can play be a big player in strap pulling. Now, in terms of hooking, inside pressures for strap. It's the opposite, right? You still want the low straps both times, but when they're hooked. Okay. So we're putting on the strap for inside pulling. I want to be connected to him. That's the goal. I want my wrist touching his wrist. So we'll go low straps, both of us. As we're tightening it up, I am supinating and going towards his wrist. I want my wrist touching his wrist in the strap. Right? So that way he can't get any space in my fingers. Hopefully the strap goes back properly. And it's generally the opposite. It's just generally the opposite of everything I just told you guys for outside pulling. I mean, if I want to be up in his fingers for outside pulling, I want to be deep in his. I want him deep in my palm as an inside pull. Right? So as we're doing this, as we're tightening it up, I'm going for height if I can, but more than anything, I'm pushing into him. pushing my palm and everything into him to get him deeper in my palm. That way I can flex my palm and I can control him. Right? So as I'm pushing forward like this, then now he's in my palm. He's not even in my fingers at all. Literally my palm's on his thumb right now. So when we start my cup, I don't need my fingers as much because my palm is cupping him, not my fingers at this point. Right? So now it's way easier to sink in a hook because I pushed deep into his hand. Now the height is important too, but not nearly as important as the depth. The depth is more important in terms of establishing a deep inside hook in strap hold, right? Like I said, the grip still makes it play. If he's top rolling, I can hold him in my palm tighter so he can't get out and still do a thumb drive. Now, say it's a top roller versus top roller, right? We do these top roll setups, both get out, our webbing's up. He starts low hand top rolling just like I'm low hand top rolling because I feel like that's the most efficient move. That's probably the most common move in strap pulling. Most people low hand top roll. So when if we both hit back pressure on this at the same time, you hit that maximum pressure right in the middle of the table. Whoever hand is higher, once we start doing this corkscrewing motion at the top, whoever's hand is higher wins that. So I don't want to be high knuckle, but I want to be higher than him. That's all that matters. So I'll even have this one knuckle a little bit higher than him. I'm not going straight knuckles up, but I'm going a little higher than him. So when we reach both back pressure, we start rotating, I'm on top of the tower. Even just a little bit. Even just a little bit is better than being underneath him if he has the high point. So all I'm doing is let's close our hands up, just going a little higher than him. So when we start doing this, I'm on top, right? But at no point am I going super high knuckles because I want pressure on this bottom strap. If I'm going knuckles up, I don't have maximum pressure on this strap. The only way you would get maximum pressure on this strap if your knuckles up is if I give him a hooker strap, right? Because then I can have it tight, but I'll be into his palm. So the top one into his palm is rough, right? I want slack. So that's why another reason why I think low hand top rolling is the best in the straps. Way better than high post and top. Unless you just have so much more hand than the other guy that none of that matters. Like you're just way down the hand. You just control them from a crappy strap setup. Then you generally want them, you want to have space, right? You want to have space in the strap, especially the bottom strap. Let's see.
How about implementing that with a referee? What are you allowed to be doing as it's being put on?
Well, say we're in a ref script, right? As a ref script, they want to get your webbing, straight, okay? Well, as they're getting the webbing straight, they usually don't worry too much about depth. Sometimes they'll grab your hand and they'll line up evenly. But as they do, I'll still be rising up a little bit. Elbow can still be sliding forward, still fighting for height. Like I said, once we close our hands, my thumb drive will still start sinking down. The moment you close my hands,
Those are happening when they do the tightening.
yeah, when they're doing the tightening in general. Now, as they're doing the first part of the strap, you can still be trying to push forward into them or trying to get backwards, but you got to kind of play by ear. Some reps are more on point, some aren't, right? Some will let you maneuver the strap and some won't. What they won't control is once you close our hands, before they say go, I can do a lot of what I want. And it's really hard to see because I'm not kicking my wrist or anything like that. But when I close my hand, the pressures I put in your hand up to me, right? Once that hand's closed up, even in a ref grip. So you close my hand, I'm driving down and rotating immediately with my thumb. I have you just sinking underneath before they say go. So when we start, I hopefully have you a little bit palm up and I can roll you up. Just by thumb drive and rising, right when they close the hand. I'm starting to tense up. And I've never been called for that one, luckily. So, but yeah, it makes people feel really uncomfortable when you start pushing down with your thumb. And a lot of pronation, especially in the hand, starts with thumb drive. That's the first component of really successful pronation in the hand. Is pushing their palm underneath you, even outside the strap, pushing their palm underneath you and then rolling out, right? Okay, so like I said, there's more to be done with straps, but from what I can show you guys from this far away, that's what I got. Do you guys have any questions about strap holding? No? All right. Okay, after that, I want to talk about programming. How I feel is the most efficient way to get stronger for arm wrestling. It's very controversial. So, in general, in terms of getting stronger for arm wrestling, there's 3 general approaches that I've seen. There's pure table time guys. They do table time 7 times a week, whatever they do. There's guys that are only in the gym that never touch a table. And then there's guys that try to recreate arm wrestling via pulley systems and rubber bands, right? So there's like pure gym guys lifting like bodybuilders who are just trying to hit muscles that have to do with arm wrestling. Now, I find myself near the third option. I've tried doing pure table time with John Brzezinski and Devin, and I've tried just only doing the gym. Right now I'm doing table time every other week, and then other than that, it's hopefully 6 days a week in the gym. But the common denominator across all these approaches is is no matter what, you have to have heavy resistance. In all cases, there's super heavy resistance. At no point, if you're lifting light or only having light resistance, I do not believe you'll ever be very strong arms, right? So John Brzezinski only got table time with world champions on his team. Okay, there was this heavy resistance. His heavy resistance was amazing dudes across the room. He grinded out with the strongest guys available, and he got stronger. Also, I mean, he's an arm wrestling to do like 2, but you know, whatever. He got his heavy resistance on the table with those guys. If you go to the gym, you lift heavy. If you do your little pulley system stuff and your rubber bands, then you hopefully are going heavy. But if you're going light and you're not like questioning, you're about to pass out. I don't know. So the problems I have with some of these approaches. One, the pure table time approach. I feel arm wrestling is a very, it's not a natural movement for our bodies. Our bodies are not meant to arm wrestle. We're not meant to purely internally rotate and do this side pressure. We're not built for it. That's why there's pain. Funny that Devin and John Brzezinski both have multiple surgeries. And they both purely do table time, right? It gets your body out of whack. I feel it's having a gym approach or having some gym in there will balance out your shoulders, external rotation, things like that. You can really add balance to a lot of your body while getting stronger on the table, right? So 1 point for gym, right? Besides that. So, and also table time, it's hard to know you're getting stronger. It really depends on your teammates. How are they feeling? Are they stronger? Are you only comfortable with them because you know their weaknesses? Are you only attacking them because you know them so well and you're exploiting these guys because you've been pulling with them for 8 years? So it's kind of hard to know how much stronger you're getting, and it's not very measurable, right? Now, the same problem I have with guys that have the pulley system and rubber bands approach. Now, like I said, I've done all 3 of these approaches. When I'm using pulley system and rubber bands and I'm trying to recreate arm wrestling on a table, then I need someone to arm wrestle like those pulleys and rubber bands. Ryan Bowen got 44% stronger using rubber bands and pulley systems, and then got crushed. Okay, so he needed someone to arm wrestle him just like that pulley system, like that rubber band, with that same size handle in that same exact direction. And with my arm is 2 inches forward of the pad, that pulley should be right there. Hopefully their hand is right there in the exact same pressure. Now you're using 40 different muscles at once, and it's uncalculable, meaning when you do these big compound movements mean you're using a lot of muscles at once, then it's hard to measure what happened. As I'm going sideways, did my pec fail? Did my chest fail? And I compensated by using more shoulder? So was it my chest really get that much stronger? Is my chest too weak? I don't know. I finished the movement. I don't know which of the 15 muscles finished the movement for me. One of them did, but I finished the movement. Well, if they pull me differently, then maybe I don't have that muscle available. So I feel like it's a really messy way to try to get stronger. It's not very measurable. You just know that I moved more weight than I did yesterday. Well, did you put your shoulder more behind it this time? Did you slide your elbow this time, or did you not? So it's hard to measure that. So the way I see arm wrestling, if we're all arm wrestlers, if you're a NASCAR driver, you don't understand what's under the hood or what goes on in the engine, that's kind of weird. If you're an arm wrestler, you don't understand how arm works, that's weird, right? You should understand what muscles are in play in there and how they work, where the connection points are, and how to work on these things. I know in each position how a pronator works, and if he's using it or if I'm using it, and if it's getting tired or if I need to work on it. So I know, if this part of my car is broken or not working, you take it out, get a new one, fix this one, whatever I need to do. So I know what's going on. You should know what's going on under the hood in your arm, right? So say I need more bicep. I know bicep controls supination. It's present when my palm is up. I need more flat bicep, okay? I go to the gym. I Google bicep workouts because bodybuilders are fantastic at isolating lifts, right? That's what bodybuilders do. They isolate each muscle. And there's a million videos on how to isolate each muscle in the entire body for bodybuilders. Now we change the reps and sets because we lift heavy. They lift generally a little bit lighter for the pump. But in general, there's so much content out there on how to isolate your muscles. So for me, knowing that my bicep is too weak, I go to the gym and I get my bicep stronger, measuring it with isolated lifts, isolated heavy lifts, and I track, knowing my bicep, just the bicep, is getting stronger. Different heads of the bicep, but for whatever specific reason or one I'm targeting, I just measure that one. So I know for a fact, and it's unquestionable, that my bicep is stronger. I've been tracking lifts. Now when I go in here and you get on my bicep, and I know how to isolate a bicep, I know how it works. I know it's strong. I don't have to wonder, I don't have to hope 44%, or this pulley's at that right angle, or this guy is a certain strength level. I know I'm stronger. It's undeniable, right, that I'm stronger in my bicep. Okay, so over time, we tear apart all the muscles we use in arm wrestling, the shopping list, and we go to the gym, we get all those stronger. To me, that makes so much sense. I'm like, okay, well now I know I'm stronger. I've torn apart each thing, and I isolate the crap out of it at the gym, and I get that one part stronger, and I go and I reapply it. So when I do my table time, I don't currently make gains from the table. Now, there's different phases kind of in an arm wrestling career. If you're 0 to a year, I call that phase one. If you're anywhere from 0 to a year, I think the most important thing you're going to get is table time. The most important thing you need to do is table time. I would say anybody from 0 to a year should be trying to get on the table as much as safety, as much as you can do it safely. Get on the table. You can do it 6 times a week safely somehow, cool. Because when you first start arm wrestling, you're going to be making gains in a lot of different areas. You're going to be making gains in terms of understanding how to be safe. You're going to make gains in understanding basic arm wrestling motions. Your joints and tendons and connective tissues are going to be understanding how to handle the pressure. And also, like any new workout, you're going to be making a lot of muscle fiber gains on the table. It's a new workout for you. You're going to get sore everywhere. You should be getting sore everywhere, right? So if you can do it safely, you're going to gain so much from being on a table a few times a week. It's the most important thing in the world. I'd say up into about a year. Now, around a year, everybody's different. People heal at different levels at different times of table time. But around a year, you should start getting more, your body should start getting adjusted more to the table. And maybe it's time to start looking at the gym. Now, if you have time within the year to hit a gym session, I would say maybe work on your hand and wrist. The thing that takes the longest to develop is your hand and wrist, cupping, pronation, rising, things like that. So if you have time and you're like, all right, I can't practice till Wednesday, it's Monday, I'm already good, okay, maybe you hit the gym and maybe you do cupping. If you're gonna do anything, do cupping. If you're already rehabbed, wrestling, right? So as you hit a year or so, I start dialing back on the table time. I would start saying maybe about once a week. Once a week where you're still going to be making the gains in your connective tissue. Hopefully you have a general idea how to stay safe right now, and you have a general overview of how to do certain motions. Okay, so now we want to start building a nice foundation in the gym. A good foundation to build, you can do more compound movements like pull-ups, things like that. Maybe if you want to do deadlifts, or you want to do big movements like overhead pressing and things like that to develop a nice base. You want your body to be able to handle heavy weight. Right? So we're working on those, and we're still working on hand and wrist. We never stop working on hand and wrist, ever as arm wrestlers. Specifically, I think cupping is number 1. I think rising is number 2, and pronation is number 3 in my book, right? But you start working on those because those take, like I said, so long to gain. So we build a foundation, right? And then we start getting more and more sport specific as time goes on. Right now, my workout sessions look pretty arm wrestling detailed, but I'm still isolating the muscles like I told you guys about. But I'm in year 12, so I would call this kind of phase 3. Now, where I'm doing table time every other week, and I'm generally just in the gym getting as strong as I can. When I go to my practice, I'm the strongest guy there by a lot. I don't like using rubber bands or 2 hands with people because it doesn't replicate arm wrestling. They'll be really strong in one direction and weak everywhere else. So it's like, all right, that's not really arm wrestling, it's just getting me stronger at one thing. So sometimes I'll do that just to test my elbow, but in general, I'll be like, I'd rather not break myself down right now, just go have a bunch of great gym sessions and get way stronger and then come back in a couple weeks. So my table time is used for what I call muscle coordination or muscle synergy, meaning learning how to put all my muscles together. So when I do movements like pull-ups, which is a compound movement, I use those not for strength gains, but I use those to get my muscles used to working together. When I do a pull-up, it's because I want to learn how to use my lat, my shoulders, my biceps, and everything together at one time in unison. So I don't approach it like that's going to get me way stronger just doing a ton of pull-ups. It will, but it's still messy because there's so many muscles in play. I'd rather just work them all individually, right? So my gym sessions right now, if you guys want to know my programming, and this is how I've made a ton of gains with this, it's say I'm 100% healthy, it'll be 6 days in the gym. It'll be 3 pushing days, so I do a big muscle group a day mixed with wrist motions at the end. So first half of my workout on a first pushing day will be chest. Say, I do 5 exercises. I do 2 sets of each exercise. I aim for around 6 reps, right? So on the 7th rep, I would fail. Now, a lot of programming you'll get from other people, you look at powerlifting programming and strongman programming, they're going to give you exact weights and reps and sets. Now, as arm wrestlers, we're jacked up all the time. We're always hurt, right? So if I tell you to go curl 35 pounds for 10 reps tomorrow, you're like, yeah, but I had table time 2 days ago. Like, I can't do that. Okay, well, that's hard. It's hard to prescribe an exact program because we're always hurt. So I aim for 6 reps. Hopefully I'm rested enough. You kind of wing it. Hopefully I feel pretty good. I aim for 6 reps where I would have failed on the 7th. I never fail in the gym. I always stop right before failure, and I don't do negatives. That's, I don't know, just personal opinion. I don't like doing negatives. I don't think it does a lot for me. And I do a lot of full range stuff. More often full range than not, probably 80% full range, right? So I do the first pushing day will be chest, meaning I'll do maybe bench press, cable flies, pec deck machine, overhead press, incline press, and something like that. So 5 exercises, 2 reps, crazy heavy, about to cramp my pants, heavy, where I would fail on the 7th rep, right? And I'll do a first warm-up set with no weight, just the bar, just kind of get the motion down, but two sets, right? This is an Indian Thursday thing. You got me on this 6 reps thing, right? So next day will be a full, so I'll do on that day, my pushing day, I finish my chest workout, then it's time to go do my arm wrestling workout. On all the pushing days, I do cupping. I do cupping on pushing days because on my pulling days, I do pronation and rising, which are elbow flexors. So I want to do elbow flexors on the day I do pulling days, right? So my pushing days, it's cupping. So I do cupping 3 times a week. Super heavy cupping 3 times a week. It recovers quickly. Your forearms, they say, are like your abs or your calves. They recover quicker than your other muscles. So I'll hit those more often, and they're the most important thing to me. So crazy heavy cupping. Same thing, when I start my cupping workout, after I finish my chest workout, then it's 5 exercises, sets of 6, a bar fail to 7, and stupid heavy. Now I isolate cupping as cupping high and cupping low, and then cupping through my fingers. Meaning I use, the only handle I really use, I mean I'm sponsored by some handle companies, but the only handle I use is my cone handle. And then I use generic, I do have a country crush I'll use, which is like a generic rolling handle. It's like 2.5 inches thick. But in general, my favorite thing is a cone handle like this. I like a cone handle because the fat part up here, it'll help isolate the cupping. Meaning I cup through my index finger or I cup through my bottom 2 fingers. Most people, if I tell you guys right now to cup as deep as you can possibly cup, most people will supinate and they'll slightly have down pressure as they cup to get the deepest cup they can. Now, if you try to cup through your index finger and cup high with your wrist risen up until you cup from there, it doesn't cup as deep. But there's an angle, especially in kind of high angle top rolling or high lifting. Cupping through your index finger and having substantial pressure through your index finger cupping leads to a million opportunities, right? That's how you control right up here rather than cupping them down here. Because I've always, you say cup as deep as I can, I'm like, all right, I'm in a hook. Every time I cup, I'm in a hook. I'm never up here. Like that feels kind of weird. So I started training, rising, pronating, and cupping through my index finger. Now the pressure, you'll feel it entirely different. It'll be up here. Because you're rising and pronating into the handle, into the cone handle, you'll feel it start building up. So all my cupping like this, it's a high attachment point coming down. I'm rising into the cone. Literally these bottom fingers are coming off the cone, and I'm curling it down with my knuckles up at all times. Now this is what I noticed against Tim Bresson. I was doing my research before my match with Tim. I noticed he goes low-handed. When I pulled it before, I know his fingers are like iron, so I can't go outside. I don't want to hook him because he's low-handed. That's a perfect move for a hook, like a deep inside hook. But I noticed that when people go right through here on it, just straight sideways, you control that. There's an opening right there, right? And so I was like, but that means I have to cut through my index finger. I can't go low. So for like a year or so, I started training that. I almost tripled my numbers cupping through my index finger. It skyrocketed all, and I measured all of it. It went super high, and my comfort levels in rising and cupping high into someone's wrist amplified, and it has the best results I've ever had in arm wrestling. Because most people always cup like this. If they cup hard, they cup inside. So once I started developing that pressure, I trained those separately. I trained cupping high separately, and I trained cupping through my big pinky fingers and supinating. I trained those entirely separately. Also, the first lift I always do every day of cupping, a barbell, like a bench squat. I take it off the rack, or I'll use a squat rack. I'll do wrist curls and squat rack. I'm that guy, right? And so I'll take the bar, I let it go down to my fingertips as low as possible before it's about to slip out. I'll just rip it into my palm, and then once it's in my palm, I'll finish it with a wrist curl. Now, as you're doing the finger movements, your wrist will blow up just in the finger part, right? The wrist curl part is just kind of for added effect, but it's mostly about containing something with my fingers and controlling it in. So I start off with that. I do that 3 times a week. Now, if you want, you can supinate into the bar, and you can take your index finger and middle finger off of it, or you can pronate into the bar, take your pinky finger and your ring finger off it, and then keep your rise. So you can just do it with your index fingers. That's a bar everybody has access to, right? Right now, after I go past like 225, then I start breaking form. I'll start just shrugging it and trying to get it up. I know that Tim Bresson said he does 300 pounds, like 330 pounds, but I watched the videos and it's just like, he's just in the finger bar. The wrist, there's basically no wrist curl left, right? So I'm big on performance. I'm big on isolation. I like to complete my lifts properly. I don't like to cheat it. So yeah, still go for around 7 reps. Right? I stick with that pretty much all my lifts. I don't like doing my own butt only because my shoulders are so jacked up from arm wrestling. It just feels weird to me, you know. Like so, it's not joking. I'm way internally rotated, so it's easier to do stuff like this, right? Now in terms of isolation and things like that, I was really hyped, but 2 or 3 weeks ago, I curled 100 pounds for a set of 6. Isolated movements like this, able to curl 100 pounds for a set of 6. Now, Levon Sagnashvili is curling like 300 pounds for like sets of 12, right? But he's swinging, meaning he's doing a lot of these cheats that I know he's stronger, but I'm saying that I'd rather do 100 pounds isolated and proper than be using 15 different muscles to try to get this weight up. Now, a lot of times you do cheat movements to focus on the eccentric phase, but I'd rather just be in control of it. I'm really proud of my 100-pound curl, and my 100-pound curl has done fantastic on the table. When I isolate my bicep against people, it holds up against everybody. So I like my isolated 100-pound curl more than a sloppy 150-pound curl, right? So yeah, that's sorry, a little tangent. But back on the cupping. So 5 sets of cupping. Next day will be pulling day. My pulling days, the least important pulling day for me is back. Right, all of our backs are stronger than our elbows and our wrists. So I do back if I get a chance. Right, so it's always the last day of my. It'll be my 3rd pulling day with back. My first 2 pulling days are going to be supinated bicep work. That means palm up at all times, if not overly supinated at all times. 5 exercises, whatever you guys want. You can Google it. I have a list of like 15 exercises I'll do. I'll pick 5 on that day, or my favorite 5. But super isolated, super supinated bicep lifts. Now this also works my supination. Cool. So check supination off the list. It's not really focused on it too much because it's part of a bicep motion. So heavy biceps, that's my pulling motion. That's my big muscle for the day. And then I go do pronation rising. 5 exercises, 6 sets, 6 right? And so pushing is chest, then biceps. Another pushing day will be shoulders, and then elbow or thumb up or palm down, which is your brachioradialis, your pronator teres, and your brachialis. That's thumb up or palm down. So one's palm up, the other day is thumb up or palm down. So reverse curls, hammer curls, things like that, right? So I'm isolating like top roll E motions, right? The same thing, everything's the same. 6 sets of 6, 5 exercises. That's I always do that. 5 sets of 6, or 5 exercises, 2 sets of 6. And then it's cupping, pronation rising, cupping, pronation rising, cupping, pronation rising. So I always hit those main 3. Now the other things for balance, when I want to hit wrist extension, I do my reverse curls. I keep my wrists up. Cool, got that done for the week, right? Because I feel the burn. It's not super important. Your body wants balance. Our body always wants balance. So if you get too unbalanced, then you need surgeries because you're only doing tabletop. So we add balance by doing external rotation, wrist extension, things like that. So that way we're not getting too out of whack. But also in terms of strength, if you want to get your forearm stronger, getting the opposite side of your forearm strong will only benefit your cupping. It'll only allow your cupping and everything to get way stronger anyway. So always add balance in all your motions, and it avoids injuries too. So in my programming, if I'm in the gym 6 days a week, that's how my days look, right? And then table time every other week just to dial in the muscle coordination and to get ready for my movements, right? To practice my movements. But I don't go there to get really strong. Right now, at 12 years in, as the strongest guy on my team, that's where I'm at, right? Everybody's kind of their different phases of what you guys will focus on. But if you guys want to worry about how I focus on getting stronger in the gym, that's what I've been doing, and I've gotten really strong. So, any questions on that stuff? So I had a question earlier about recovery. I wasn't going to have a whole spiel on this, but I'll touch on it because I know a lot of guys have heard it. The general, depending on how you arm wrestle, you have different pains. I mean, everybody's built different, and people are deficient in certain areas or overdeveloped in other areas, So it's kind of hard to get really specific on it. But if we're talking about inner elbow pain, I'm not a doctor. I'm not super well versed on what internally is happening in the elbow exactly. So I can tell you how I dealt with it and how my team generally deals with it. We cry. I'll tell you which ibuprofen. But basically, I mean, when my elbow is tore up, generally your elbow gets torn up when your forearm is vertical. Meaning a lot of people stay so vertical when they slide their elbow in that they're already on the edge of their elbow, right? So big guys with big chests, or ladies sometimes, have their arm out slanted when they put their elbow down, right? Which means there's no optimal pressure on your elbow because it's already slanted. It's on the right side of the head. At no point is it vertical. So those people have more problems with their shoulders, right? If your arm's always slanted. Guys, people have their arms straight up or drive sideways like this or get behind, that's when you start getting that crazy elbow pressure. So if you have those generic elbow pains, they say it's your ulnar nerve inflamed is the most common one. Your hands are shaking, it's hard to move, and you're in the corner like that. Anti-inflammatories can help. I used to, when I was in a bed, I would sleep, I'd take like 2 towels and I would loosely wrap them around my elbow. So that way when I slept, I would keep my arm straight. You want to keep your arm straight so it doesn't restrict that nerve. You don't want to keep it pinched at all times. You want to keep your arm straight. That'll help me when I'm sleeping so it wouldn't hurt so bad. Hydration is big. I like ice and heat, but generally your body will take care of itself. You know what I mean? But everybody has that scare where you're like, man, should I go to the doctor? Should I go to the hospital? Is this abnormal? You wake up in the middle of the night thinking you're the only guy that's ever gone through that pain. You're like, I think I should go to the hospital. But generally, it's just that ulnar nerve. It gets inflamed. It's connected to your pinky finger and your ring finger mostly. So when I do heavy, like even if I do grippers with my elbows like that, it'll light up everything because it connects all the way to these two fingers. So you kind of just gotta let it rest, you guys. Once that ulnar nerve's inflamed, you gotta let it hang out and chill for a little bit. Keep it straight and just hydrate and wait for it to deflame. Basically, I mean that's the best advice I have for it. There's no super awesome advice. Todd Hutchings does the JM presses. I have not gone down that path yet. I messed with them like twice. JM presses are kind of like a bench press, kind of like a skull crusher. Basically, you lay on the bench, and you bring it down to about your neck, like the bar, really lightweight. You bring it back down your neck, and then you extend it all the way up. But the whole time you are supinating the bar. You're trying to supinate the bar as you do it, and you're pulling full extension. Anyway, because your hand is built like this, or it's straight like this, it puts maximum pressure on your elbow right there when you're doing it. I've done it once, and I couldn't do the rest of my workout. I did it the first thing, and then I was like, oh, that feels great, and I couldn't lift a single thing the rest of the day. So I'm trying to wean it into my workout program. But he says that develops your elbow a ton and allow you to not get your elbow tired. But like I said, I haven't tried that.
Phenomenal.
Oh, see, there you go. I've heard good things. So I'm trying to get into it a little bit. Now, shoulder and the other recoveries, I get worked on. At this point, I'm trying to become some kind of professional athlete, so I try to get worked on a lot. Right? Hopefully, at least once a month, if not a couple times a month, I have a few different massage therapists, people I know, that'll come over and work. My shoulders are always out of whack. I always get knotted up. Everything's always because I don't know what it is, but it feels like nowadays everything just gets hurt all the time. Not serious injuries, but everything just gets tweaked, yanked, and pulled in weird directions. So I get worked on a lot. I'll do ice and heat therapy. If you're on a budget, I bought on Amazon for like $30. I bought elbow ice sleeves, and then I bought an office trash can. Fill that thing up with hot water, sit in front of the TV, and I'll have ice sleeves on my elbow for 5 minutes. Take those off, dump my whole arm in hot water. 5 minutes, take it out. Ice sleeves back on. 5 minutes. I'll just do that. Heat and cold, bring blood in and out. Right. Generally, the cycle between recovering and strength gains is tear the muscle down, arm wrestling, lifting weights, whatever you're doing. You put the right things in your blood, eating correctly, use supplements, whatever you're doing, and get that blood to the affected area, right? Via ice, heat, flossing, there's a bunch of ways, scraping, there's massage therapy, there's a million ways to get the blood to the affected area, then it heals. You do that all over again. It's a cycle we do. Tear it down, the right stuff in your blood, get the blood there. Over and over again, right? Rinse and repeat. Anything worse than that, go to the doctor. I mean, that's the best advice, you know. If it's something that's unexplainable, wrist cracking, things like that, I mean, go get it checked out. Every once in a while, you get those three pops of death in your elbow. We all call it popping your elbow in arm wrestling, where you don't have any side pressure for a while. I don't know what happens in there, but we've all had it 1,000 times, and you can't go sideways for 6 months, and then you have to learn how to talk. So that's all I got for that. You guys have any questions in terms of recovery? All right. After this, I'll touch on tournament super match prep, getting ready for a tournament, kind of apply yourself there. And then I want to do the building and running a team thing. People kind of fall off of that. But okay, so in terms of tournament and super match prep, when I'm getting ready for a tournament and or super match, I'll be doing a lot of video work, right? So I generally know who's going to be in my class, so I'll spend my time watching them, getting a rough idea of how I would pull them. Watch them pull multiple matches, and then see and understand how I approach them. I'm not a fan of making adjustments at the table. There's a fine line between somebody else dictating what's going on the table and you adjusting too much, or all of a sudden you're not in your move or in your comfort zone because you keep adjusting to that. My rule of thumb for me is I will not make any more adjustments unless they do something crazy wild like they have been doing all tournament, and then for me they do a whole different move. But in general, I go up there, I go, okay, last minute, all right, I'm going knuckles up. I'll go up there and I'm going knuckles up no matter what. Like I've made that decision and I'm doing that. Unless he was a top roller all day and now he's hooking, I'm okay, wait, hold on. This is a little bit different. But in general, I don't like to deviate from my plan too much because once I settle on a plan, then I can add aggression to it. I can just keep it simple and just fly off the handle like this. In terms of me physically prepping for a tournament and or super match, I do table time up to 2 weeks out, no more table time after that. Then up to a week out, I'll lift heavy. The thing you're trying to control is your CNS, your central nervous system. If you're going to failure doing max deadlifts anywhere near a week and a half out, that's bad, right? Your nervous system won't recover in time, and you'll be tired. You'll be somewhat drained by the time you go to an arm wrestling match. They say it takes, depending on how much you drain your CNS, it takes up to a week and a half to recover that, right? So you don't want to go to a tournament and be like, why do I feel so crappy, man? Well, most feel okay, I just have no energy. It's because your CNS is dead because you went max effort on something you shouldn't have gone max effort on. You depleted yourself. So a lot of rest, a lot of hydration. Like I said, I'll lift up to a week before, but I won't be going insanely heavy. You're not gonna make a ton of gains a week before a tournament. We all think we can. You're just gonna hurt yourself, right? So that's physically how I prep for it. And it's just the last few table times are just kind of going over the motion. If you're trying to lock in a move, you know, a week and a half before an event, like you have no idea what you're gonna do. Like you wasted months leading up to this tournament. If you still don't know what you're doing or have a move planned by then, you've been wasting too much time. So we should already have the game plan pretty much dialed in for the super match and or for the tournament. What we plan on doing a while before then, right? So the way I like to iron out moves. So say I plan on high hooking for this next match or this tournament. When I go to practice, I'll have my most trusted teammate, my most veteran teammate, someone I know knows what I'm doing. He'll use two hands. Now I said I don't like using two hands with people in terms of strength training, but I like using two hands with people in terms of dialing in a move. So I got a teammate, Carlo. He always works with me on my team. He'll use two hands, and what I'll tell him is I'll get ready for the move I plan to do. Everything's locked in, turn it ready, and I'll have him put pressure, dial in the pressure in certain spots where I like it. So as I'll go through the motion, we'll literally do sets, like 3 sets of 6. I'll be like, I'll go through the motion, whatever move I plan on doing, I'll be okay, more pronation and attack my rising more. And he'll dial it in, I'll be like, okay, that was good. A little more into my side pressure. So eventually we'll get it all dialed in where I like it and where I want the pressure, and then we start the heavy resistance. So I'll do 3 sets of 6, and I'll have him let me hit it, and at no point do I break forward. I'll have other guys watching me, I'm like, my elbow slips out an inch, tell me, we're stopping. It's too heavy, he's giving me too much resistance, I'm failing in this lift. So just like a lift, I'll go through this motion, being perfect, everything tight, and I'll be pinning him. Like we'll do this 3 or 4 times in practice, where he'll be like, all right, Derick, you ready? Oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I'll come back up and I'll be sweating, and I'll just keep going through this exact motion just to dial it in. I'm just working on the muscle synergy, getting everything dialed in, but really heavy, where I'm just about to fail, but nothing sacrificed. At no point is any part of my move fail. That's how I dial in a move for any kind of match. And he has to be, I want a veteran guy because I don't want some new guys trying to yank my arm or get me out of position or not understand what I'm trying to accomplish. I want someone that understands arm wrestling a little bit with me, so they're just letting me pin. There's no pride involved. Just let me pin your 1,000 pounds, man. Just chill, right? Okay, so the goal should be, especially for a lot of amateurs, when you guys go to the tournament or you go to a match, you're going to the table, it's hard because you're so excited about the arm wrestling match that you start thinking of 1,000 things. You start thinking of everything you've ever learned in arm wrestling, all in that exact moment. You go up there and you're running through, okay, peg's supposed to be here, oh, it's supposed to be grabbed like that, foot, oh, that foot's supposed to be around there, elbow down, oh, why is he screaming at me? Okay, wait, hold on. So elbows down, shoulder, okay, I gotta get that straight. What'd you say? Someone's yelling at me? Oh, okay, what ref? You're everywhere, right? You're going through a million different things while you're trying to focus on this. The goal is to get present with this. And so I think the best way to do that is to focus on one thing. If we've been practicing, the muscle memory that we've been locking in these arms should do what it needs to do, right? I pick one simple movement and I obsess on that one simple movement in a match. At this point for me, I don't really do that anymore. I just go as hard as I can and everything does what it should. But when I was an amateur, once I got over the overthinking process, I remember I'd tell myself, whatever I want to do for this guy, I need to cup him in. I know I need to do a lot of stuff, but I need to cup him in. The most important thing I need in this match is to cup this guy in. I have to cup. So I go there and I would just think, cup. Everything else, hopefully that elbow slid the way I wanted it to. Hopefully that shoulder's where I want it to be because I've been practicing. Just cup as fast as I can. Just cup. And then hopefully I get that cup and then everything locks in the way we've been working on. But you start thinking of everything else, you're gonna go slow. These tournaments where you go, ready, go. That sucks. That's the worst one because then you leave the turn like I didn't even get into my move. I didn't even try. It was like, wait, why did I even cup? I didn't even go. Like I'd rather have someone go and fail. You have 3 false starts before you lose. Like use some of them if you need to. If you have trouble going, then false start, fire off. Like you might hit the go perfectly. Either way, just losing on ready go over and over again. It's horrible. It's so draining, right? So I tell my guys, when I'm coaching my guys, they hear me screaming, just go first. I could give them a million tips. No, slide your elbow, move your knuckles up, what are you doing? I don't say all that stuff because it's just going to overcomplicate things. I just say, go first. That's all I scream. Just move your body. Just do something before it goes. And usually they'll surprise themselves. They'll be like, oh, okay, I got it. Now, if we want to get technical after the match or before the match, I'm like, hey, make sure you keep your elbow in front of the paddle or whatever it is for that guy. But in general, in that moment, don't overthink. Hopefully the training is paid off and just go first. Just do something. Just don't be a victim to whatever they decide to do. At this point for me now, I just headphones, crazy heavy death metal. I'm thinking some crazy thoughts in my head, and I just go there, just go. I'm doing me. I don't really care what you're doing. Like, I'm just gonna do what I'm gonna do. And you're gonna fail, hopefully. Now, in terms of amateurs and tournaments, the most valuable experience you can get in arm wrestling is tournament experience. To undervalue that is to do yourself a huge disservice. I know a lot of guys that go to practices, and they'll go to practice for like 3 years and not hold a tournament. And they'll be like, well, I just don't think I'm ready. I don't think I can get first place at a tournament yet. It's like, I'm not ready for a tournament. If you want to be safe, you're ready for a tournament. I pulled a tournament before I ever went to a practice. I started with a tournament, and I didn't know how to be safe. But the tournaments are fewer and further in between than practices, and the amount of information you gain out of a tournament is huge. You guys won't remember what place you got in your second tournament of your arm wrestling career, and it won't matter. All that matters is that you soak up as much information from that tournament as you can, so you eventually start winning. People get way too obsessed with winning their second amateur tournament ever. When you plan on being this top pro or whatever you want to be, that's nothing. That second amateur tournament is nothing. It doesn't mean anything to you. So if you're not leaving there a better arm wrestler than when you got there, you're screwing yourself over. You should learn how to deal with, you should learn how much sleep you needed the day before, how much you should have hydrated, how to deal with your energy levels, your nerves. You should be soaking all this in by entering as much as you can. If you know how to be safe and you have enough money, you should enter every class you could possibly enter, in my opinion, as an amateur. As an amateur, you should be entering multiple weight classes, right, left-handed, enter pro. I always entered pro every time I could. I want to learn how the pros cheat. How'd you guys do? Oh, if I get a win, cool. Of course I'm going to try each round. If I get a win, that's awesome. But in general, I know that I'm trying to get to the peak of this mountain. That's my goal. I know what my goal is. I've been saying it out loud for everybody. My goal is to be number one in the world. Okay, if that's the goal, this tournament means nothing. This means nothing to me, and it's just a step for me to get there. Okay, so if I view it as such, then I will just be trying to soak in the most experience that I can, after pulling as much as I can, which I know a lot of you guys do. But when I hear about guys like amateur for their first tournament, like, oh, I'm just doing one arm, 165 amateur, I'm like, dude, are you broke or something? Like, you don't know, like, just enter everything. Like, what are you going to enter a few classes? If you can afford it, enter all the classes. Why? Soak it up. It doesn't matter if you get that win or you get third place there. You're going to forget about it in a month. Just get the most you can out of a tournament. Go to every tournament you can go to drive through. I don't know how many tournaments I've gone to. So many tournaments I've gone 0-4. It's ridiculous. I don't remember how many tournaments I got destroyed. But now, finally, I've gotten all those lessons out of the way, and hopefully I'm winning that, right? But yeah, when I hear about amateurs not getting tournament experience, it just makes no sense to me. Trying to wait to win this random amateur event, which in the long run you're not going to care about. Unless your goal purely is to get first place in amateur one time in your weight class and stop there, and I guess maybe that's your thing. But to me, if you plan on having bigger goals than that, then just go through the tournaments, man. Start traveling and getting those tournaments under your belt as much as you can, and getting those wins or that experience dialed in. Because it's a lot. Learning how to do the tournaments, learning how to have your mindset right, prep and everything like that, it's a lot. It takes effort, it takes time. Okay, that's all I got for that. Any questions? Tournaments and supermatch prep. All right. Show of hands, who wants to talk about building and running a team? Anybody?
We're not going to talk about it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Two guys said yes. So other than that, we'll stop now. I'll talk to you guys individually about it. But that's all I got, guys. Any questions at all about anything I talked about?
Very informative.
What's that?
Very informative.
All right, guys. That's all I got. Thank you.